Hello, how are you doing? And welcome to another episode of the Dr. Will Show, where we have the discussions that inform, entertain, and empower educators to be the change. I'm your host, Dr. Will, and I am so glad to have Stefanie O'Connell with me again today. And when I say again, I mean we shot this episode and I had problems with the sound. And so she was gracious enough to come back on the show. Thank you, Stefanie.
Well, thanks for having me back.
Well, you are welcome. And people, the impetus for this show was always about, getting money savvy and understanding money as power, as freedom. And as educators, I always tell people I like to educate the whole teacher because, normally I talk about technology and how that's changing the classroom. But we are people. And as people, we get paid and we live a life and we have a life outside of school. So that's one of the reasons why I have these discussions on my show. And I had Stefanie on because she showed up in my Twitter feed from a retweet for someone. And then I started looking at her YouTube videos. And I said, oh, this is awesome. And the more I did research and I went to her website, I said, okay, I got to get her on my show. And I was so blessed that she said yes. So we're going to have her on. So for those who are watching and will be listening, will you please introduce yourself?
Well, hi, everybody. My name is Stefanie O'Connell. I run a website, StefanieO'Connell.com, which is all about helping people feel as confident managing their money as they do in their careers and their relationships and the rest of their lives. And I'm the author of a book called The Broke and Beautiful Life.
Awesome. And we'll be getting into that book. So, Stefanie, I know you started your career in the arts, and it's interesting because you're doing these plays and you're even on a cruise ship, singing. How do you go from there to personal finance?
Yeah, it's a funny story. So I was working in theater and specifically musical theater, singing, cruise ships, all of that for like 7 years. And I loved it. I was really passionate about performing. I'm still passionate about performing and I'm passionate about the arts. But money was a constant struggle. Not surprisingly, I was doing the whole starving artist thing. I would be coming back from a contract, trying to figure out how I could pay my bills, make ends meet. I would get babysitting jobs. I would work at restaurants. And I really just found it, while a lot of the work was artistically or emotionally fulfilling, all of the space in between the work was so draining and it was so exhausting. And it was really this unsustainable cycle that I found myself in, of these artistic highs and then these financial lows. And I realized, I had this light bulb moment that, though I had been so driven to pursue a career in the arts and pursue my passion, I had this light bulb moment of like, wow, money really matters, because I think there's this notion that, oh, like money isn't everything. If you do what you love, everything works itself out. And the fact is, money buys groceries, money buys time, money buys healthcare, and that stuff is important. And if you have a strong financial foundation, that is what really enables you to do the things that you care about without constant stress of how am I going to pay my bills? How much do I need to hustle in order to continue doing this? And so if I could flip the script and build the financial foundation first, then I can pursue, these things that I love to do, these passions I have, whether they're arts or otherwise, and really, do it with a lot more freedom. And so, that really sent me on this journey of trying to really get a handle on my finances and understand everything I could about my money and how to master it and how to maximize it so that I could start living my life on my terms and not be inherently limited by whoever offers me a job or who doesn't, or be at the mercy of when I get a job, because that's so much stress to live under every single day.
So earlier you mentioned that you wrote The Broke and the Beautiful Life, and great title, by the way. Walk us through the book. What what was your pain point for writing it, and how did you go about sort of talking about how important money is?
Yeah. So The Broken Beautiful Life is really about this journey I was just kind of giving the big picture about of here I am. I am an artist, and I'm having this realization of the value and importance of money, and that I can use it as a tool to better live my life and do the things I care about. But what is the process? How do I begin? I'm so overwhelmed. I don't even have a starting point. And the book is really kind of my own personal journey of going through that process, because the way I came about writing the book was I had started a blog to keep myself accountable to my financial journey. And I chronicled every step of the process from this moment of realization to the point where I really was in a position that I was totally financially viable. I was saving, I was investing for retirement. And so there's a lot of questions in the interim that I think people have. And because I chronicled that on my blog, I already had a roadmap. And so what I decided to do was put it into this book. Actually, a publisher reached out to me, and then I decided, okay, I'll make it a book. But it was really about, how do I get financially savvy? What is the steps? What is that like emotionally? A little bit more holistically. How do I think about this within the context of living a life of passion, of purpose, of mission? And then also, how do I enjoy the process? I think there's this notion of, being financially responsible is not fun. It's not fun to save. It's a sacrifice. And I really didn't, I knew that wasn't going to be sustainable either. If we were thinking about a financially successful life being something that's really arduous, it's not going to be sustainable. So I was trying to reframe the process for myself as I worked through it. And what I found is that if you have the right mindset, if you have the right approach, it actually isn't about the things you have to give up. It's about the things you stand to gain. And so that's the perspective I wanted to bring to this book was there are hard choices to be made. Yes, it's a process that's going to require work and time and effort and energy. But not only is it about where you end up, not only is it about the freedom and the joy of the destination, the process in and of itself offers us so much enlightenment, so much identifying our true priorities, so much realigning our lives to be in alignment with those priorities, because that's what it's really all about. The money is just the tool, but it's really about asking ourselves these bigger picture questions of what is really valuable and important to me, and how do I ruthlessly align my spending and my lifestyle to be in alignment with that purpose and my goals and the things I care about most. And so that's what the journey of the book was all about.
And that's interesting because, in our profession, a lot of people just talk about how noble it is and how we are serving a greater purpose for humanity. And that may be well and true, but you can't eat with that.
That's right. And it's not either or. I think this is the other big thing. It's like people say, oh, I can go make a lot of money and hate my life, or I can go be noble and serve a purpose and be poor. And it just doesn't have to be that way. One of the rules you learn in acting and in improv is it's an exercise called yes and. And basically what you do is when you're improvising a scene, when your partner brings something up, you have to accept the circumstances they're presenting to you as true, and then you have to add something. So it's called the rule of yes and. And this is like how I like to approach life. So I want to love what I do, yes, and I want to make a good living that enables me to afford my lifestyle on my terms. Not this or this. I want to figure out how can I re-engineer, rethink, reapproach so that I'm seeing how can I get all the things I want instead of either or. And so if we can shift our framework to think a little bit more critically about our own mindset, I think that we can stand to find some creative solutions that we never previously considered. For me, I now speak about money for a living. And for me, it's it's performing. I go up in front of big stages of people, and I can make in an hour what I used to make in a month. So it's not that I'm not doing the things I love. Now I feel even more driven by the work I'm doing, because I'm also doing it for other people. When I was an artist, like, I did it because I was passionate about it, right? But people don't pay you to be passionate. They pay you to serve a purpose. They pay you because of what you do for them. And so now I'm offering value. I'm performing in this new medium, and I get well compensated. And it's so much bigger and greater than anything I could have previously imagined. And I think that's one of the other traps when we get caught up in this idea of nobility and either or, is that we miss out on the greater opportunities we never even considered possible because we haven't explored the other options.
So on your website, and I love this statement. I wish I should just get this and print it out and actually put it in my office wall. But it says the life you want has a price tag. And I've never really thought about it in that way, but it's so true. So what would you say are the do's and don'ts for financial planning?
So this idea of the life you want has a price tag is really about grounding your desires and your dreams and your goals in what is real and tangible. So you know what they say, like a dream without a plan, just a wish, right? So it's the same thing with money. You know, we all think, oh, you know, whatever your goals are, I want to buy a house, I want to start a family, I want to travel the world, whatever it is for you. We can say that over and over again. But if we don't actually break down, okay, I want to buy a house, how much do I need for the down payment? What's my timeline, and how much do I need to save each month in order to get that down payment by the time I want to buy the house, then it's not going to happen. So we have to start grounding our hopes and dreams for the future in real tangible metrics. And money is an essential part of that process. And it's one of the things I really like about finance, and one of the things that I find comforting, is this ability to measure and track your progress. I know it's one of those things that you feel like a lot of people feel out of control about. You know, money can be stressful, it can be anxiety producing, it can be all these other negative things. But the one thing that it is tangible. And so you can see it's black and white. It's right there in front of you. You can ground yourself in the numbers. You can break those numbers down into smaller daily action steps or weekly goals or monthly goals. You can see how you're doing along the way. And there's not a lot of mystery to it. And so I think one of the most fundamental principles of using money and financial planning to your advantage is that sense of measurable, tangible metrics and making the most of them. So figuring out the cost of your goals, figuring out the timeline, and then breaking them down. What do I have to save each year to get this house or this travel or whatever it is I want?
So, you know, as an educator, our salaries are just set because the state and local contribution is state. So you're not going in and negotiating a raise. So depending on your state, your level of education, years of experience, your salary will be set no matter what. And in your 20s, of course, you're not making what you are making when you're in your 40s with hopefully, you know, an advanced degree. So at different stages of people's lives, what should they be looking for in terms of planning for retirement?
Yeah, so, you know, in every stage, it's a little bit different. When you're just starting out, you might also be dealing with a lot of debt, maybe student loan debt, maybe credit card debt. So that's going to be a bigger priority probably than maybe maxing out your retirement contributions. Though what I do like to say is that, you know, for people who are in that place where they have they have debt, they want to start saving, and they want to save for retirement, in terms of how to prioritize, the first step I always say is getting at least 1 month worth of expenses in a savings account. You know, I know it hurts to have that interest accumulating on your debt, but if you don't have a small buffer of savings, then if something unexpected happens, you're only going to accumulate more debt and likely at a higher interest rate because you'll probably have to use a credit card. So you really want to build that one month buffer of savings. And then from there, if you do have a workplace plan, which I'm sure a lot of educators, you do, unless though if you are adjunct or you don't have benefits, there are other ways to plan. But if you do have the workplace plan, definitely take advantage of it. If you get an employer match, it's obviously you want to be maxing out the employer match for your retirement contributions as soon as possible. And then from there, get aggressive about paying off any debt, especially if we're talking about high interest debt. So if you're going to have a debt that has an interest rate of 7% or more, then I would say, you really do want to prioritize paying off that debt before you go full max out on retirement planning, because the return you're going to get by paying off your debt is a guaranteed, 7% or higher return. And while the stock market, it does perform pretty well over the long term, it's hard to say you're going to beat 7% or 8% or 9 or 10 or a credit card 15%. So basically when you pay down debt, that's especially high interest debt, you're getting a guaranteed return on your investment. So I would say for younger people who might still have a lot of that, to really prioritize that. Now, as you start moving along and getting those debts paid off, and you're moving into your 30s and 40s, definitely want to get more aggressive about saving for the future, saving for retirement. That said, I would caution a lot of people in their 30s and 40s not to deplete their savings otherwise, because retirement money is for retirement. You can't really touch it until you're 59 and a half, 60, whatever. So if you probably have a lot of goals to live, right? In between 30 and 60, there's a lot of things you want to do, and you want to have the savings available to you in order to achieve those goals. So let's say you're 35 and you want to start a family. Well, okay, you're going to need that money liquid and accessible to support your family, to, buy a house, to do whatever you want to do. And not have it all tied up in your retirement accounts, because if you withdraw from your retirement accounts, you're going to have to pay some really hefty penalties. So it's important while it's important to be aggressive about saving for retirement as aggressively as possible, we also need to consider all the life we want to live before retirement and the money that's going to be required to support those goals too.
So I haven't spoken, of course, to every educator around the world. I am a part of a Voxer group, Teacherpreneurs, where, we talk a lot about money and putting in the work and, building this, amazing life for ourselves, in terms of, building wealth. And yet, for people in our profession and, many people, money is still evil. And they don't look at it as, well, that person's out there greedy. They're greedy.
Right.
Instead of understanding that there is power in it. And quite honestly, there's nothing wrong with someone saying, I want money. I love money. I want to obtain, money. Because look, I'm not talking about cutting the rug up under someone to get paid, but I am saying, that, keeping your eyes on the prize is very important. So how does someone go about actually mentally changing their relationship with money and understanding how powerful it is in actually creating the life they want?
Yeah, so a lot of these beliefs that you're talking about, like this idea that money is evil, or that rich people are greedy, or that the only way to get ahead is to cut others down. A lot of these beliefs are subconscious, and we don't even realize we're walking around with them. So the first thing we really need to do is look back and kind of identify, what beliefs do we have about money? How was money talked about as we were growing up? What was our first experiences with money? How did our parents talk about money? Our grandparents, our culture, our friends, our peers, our teachers? What messages have we maybe internalized? And then we can look at those beliefs and we can reality check them. We can say, okay, money is evil. Well, is money evil? If money buys food, if money buys time that I can then give to serve others, if money buys support for my family, if money buys education, if money buys, so we can say, actually, okay, let me test this assumption and rethink it. And what we'll generally find is that, money is inherently nothing. It is not good. It is not bad. It is just a tool. And it's a resource like wood, right? And you can use it to burn or you can use it to build. And so the way we think about money and the way we interact with money is what informs whether we're using it as a positive or negative property. So if we can think about it this way, take our beliefs, our assumptions, reality check them, and then consciously choose to use it as a tool to build and serve and give, then we can start to rethink what making money, building wealth, and living prosperously and richly really means, because it really does mean being able to maximize your impact. Limited income, limited wealth, it's not just about money. It's about how it limits your peace of mind. It's about how it limits your security. It's about how it limits your choices, your freedom, how your capacity to give back to others. And so that's what it's really about. And so if we can start, reframing the conversation, reality check our assumptions, and consciously move forward with new wealth positive thoughts and beliefs, then we're far more likely to not only see money as a good resource, but also to attract more of it.
So let's get into cost cutting and saving. Mm-hmm. How important is it for people to create a budget? And how should someone go about savings? And I know you talked about earlier about certain different stages, but like for me, we already put away, let's say 10% every month. Boom, that's gone. But then, and we've had this happen early in the year, rain comes, you hear the boop, 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 boop. And we had to have a roofer come over and replace a piece. And that was $500. So I had to reach into savings to pull that out. And so when thinking about saving, does one need to say, this is my retirement savings versus this is my savings for emergencies versus this is savings because I want to go to Disneyland at the end of the year?
Yeah. So I love that. I think sometimes when we have an emergency and we have to pull from our savings, we resent it. But in fact, that's what it's there for. And it's so much better to be able to pull that money from your savings account and to have that money than it is to be like, I don't have the money. What am I going to do? All the stress. Now I'm going to have to borrow this money with a really high interest rate and pay it back for the next 6 months. So just to start with, let's remember that I know nobody wants to get a parking. Nobody wants their roof to collapse. Nobody wants this stuff to happen. But the value of saving money in a short-term liquid emergency fund like you had is so wonderful, because it's not really just about your car breaking down or having a cavity or whatever it is. It's about being able to not have that completely wreck your financial life. And that peace of mind and security is so valuable. And so in terms of how do we go about creating those savings, I think it's super smart to have, if you can get 3 to 6 months worth of living expenses in an emergency savings account. And what that is just a savings account that is liquid and accessible. It's not a retirement account that you can't touch for the next however many years. It's there available to you, but not so available that you take money out of it when it's not an emergency. So I like to use online savings accounts personally, because that way I have to wait at least 2 days for the money to transfer over to my checking account. And that way I know I'm not really touching the money unless it's a real emergency. I have to have like this forced 24 to 48 hour waiting period. So I like having my emergency savings bucket. The other savings bucket, like we talked about before, is retirement, and really thinking about future me and what do I, thinking about your, not just retirement as some distant far off thing, but like you. It's not somebody else. It's not a stranger. It's you. So, sometimes some of my friends like to give their retirement selves a name, because that helps them, connect with the reality that's them, and not some stranger that you can just brush off and not take care of. So, just a trick if you want to try that. So you got emergency money, you got retirement money. And then before, what I was saying is, like, you want to consider all the life you want to live in between that trip to Disneyland. You want to think about, the trip to anywhere, the family, all of the big milestone goals that cost money. So that's going to be like your life savings bucket. That's going to be, here are my goals that are not an emergency, they're not retirement, but all the money, all the life I want to live in between. And that's also this idea of the life you want has a price tag. That's where that kind of money comes in. Now, in terms of how to make these goals happen, and where budgeting plays in the process, I am not an advocate of any one system, because what I have found is that everyone is very different in finding the system that works for them. For one person, it might make sense to account for literally every dollar they earn, and say, okay, this much of my salary goes to savings for retirement, this much goes to my emergency money, this much goes to my goal of going to Disney, and then this goes to my rent, this goes to my groceries, this goes to this, every single dollar accounted for. And that's a great system for someone who really thrives off of like digging into the numbers and tracking everything. But for somebody else, that might be so overwhelming that they just give up. And so I don't want anyone to give up. I want everyone to find the system that works for them. So maybe for someone else, it's just about knowing what the cost of their monthly necessities are each month, and then knowing how much they are saving for their goals each month, and then spending freely otherwise. So they have two benchmarks in their brain that they carry around with them. This is my bill money, this is my savings money, and then I get to spend however I want the rest of it. And maybe that's a better system. And then finally, this idea of what you were saying of, how much of your paycheck immediately goes into savings. Well, that's another great way to do it, is to automate your payments to yourself and to your future self. So if at the beginning of every month, or like the day after you get your paycheck, you have money automatically going into your savings account and your retirement accounts, then all that's left over is free, available to you to spend, the way you want. And you don't even see the money sitting in your checking account, and you're not tempted to overspend because it never showed up in the first place. It's already been rerouted for you. So again, there's all these different kinds of approaches. And the key is really sticking with it and not giving up until you find the approach that works for you. What I find for a lot of people, is that the biggest asset that they have in terms of mastering their financial lives is just taking the time and making the commitment to stick to it. Because everyone thinks like it's just something that I can't do. And that's not true. It's just about keeping the commitment and sticking with it long enough and trying different strategies until you do find one that works for you and your lifestyle. And I think there's a disservice when we get this kind of prescriptive advice, like there's only one way to go about it. There's only one way to pay off your debt. There's only one way to budget. And that's just not true. You have to remember, personal finance is personal. And so if you continue to work within these different kinds of frameworks, automating, budgeting every dollar, spreadsheets, apps, whatever it is, keep going until you find the system that works for you.
Mm-hmm. And so, my wife is, she's one of those people that she loves to do a lot of research online. And when we were having our discussions about finances and kind of getting to the next step, she said, "Oh, have you heard about this Roth IRA?" Mm-hmm. And I said, "Okay." And she kind of read some information to me. So would you please go into what a Roth IRA is, and what would be the advantages of someone actually using that to build wealth?
So a Roth IRA is it's a type of individual retirement account. That's what IRA stands for. And this is an account you can open on your own. You don't have to do it through an employer. So for example, if you don't have employer benefits, or if you've already maxed out your employer benefits, is a great way to save for retirement, either in addition to your employer plan, or if you don't have an employer plan. And the thing that's so attractive about the Roth IRA is that while you contribute to it with your after-tax dollars, just like your regular money that you would get in your paycheck after your taxes have been taken out, the money in the account grows tax-free through retirement. So, for example, I'm 31 and I've had a Roth IRA for 6 years, and just the gains, like not what I've contributed, just my investment gains are over $10,000. I don't have to pay any taxes on that. And those are going to continue to gain until I'm in retirement. So let's say that, someday if I keep contributing and the stock market continues to perform, that could be worth hundreds of thousands of dollars, tax free. Like, think about how much money gets taken out of your check each week when you're just making like $800. Now imagine that, like $800,000. So this is like the beauty of the Roth IRA is, wow, I get to have my money grow and work for me, and I don't have to pay taxes on those gains. And the idea being that you've already paid taxes on the money before you contributed into the retirement account. And that's what and then these these retirement vehicles enable you to kind of grow that money and serve your future self, is such a wonderful tool to use. But because it's such a wonderful tool, one thing to be aware of is that there is limit to how much you can contribute to the Roth IRA each year. As of this year, I believe it's still $5,500 a year. And the other thing about the Roth IRA is if for some reason you start making crazy amounts of money, you cannot contribute to it anymore. So I think it's somewhere around $130,000 a year. If you make more than that, you can't, either it starts phasing out how much you can contribute, or you can't contribute at all. I can't remember the exact cutoff because it changes about every year or two. But if you do anticipate for some reason your income skyrocketing, you want to make sure you're going to take advantage as much as possible before that happens, and really use the tax advantaged retirement savings vehicle of a Roth IRA while you still can.
And you just mentioned investing. Now, I know for myself, when I think of investing, I think of Bill Gates, I think of Warren Buffett, like heavy players out there with that type of money to put in the market.
Right.
But I know that that's just not true, that, you could work at McDonald's and invest in the market.
Absolutely.
Now. You're not going to be able to afford Apple stock, but that doesn't mean you can't get in the game. So how should someone approach investing in the market, and what should they, in terms of expectations, what should their realistic expectations be?
Yeah, so actually a lot of the things that we're talking about, Roth IRAs, 401ks, things like that, that's investing. And a lot of that's a misconception people have, is they don't realize that investing is actually very boring if you do it right. It's really just about setting your money aside in those accounts, hopefully automatically coming out of your paycheck, and just letting it sit there and grow until you reach retirement age, and then withdrawing it, and not playing around with fancy stocks, buying lots of Bitcoin, going crazy. When this is my investment philosophy, is like, tune out the noise, play the long game, contribute, let it sit, let it grow. And in terms of, what you're really investing in, these accounts we're talking about, IRAs, 401ks, et cetera, those are holding accounts. So like this tax advantage status is just for that account. But within the account, you need to actually choose your investments. Now, if you have an employer 401k, you are probably automatically have an investment option that's chosen for you. Usually it's like a life cycle fund, and essentially life cycle funds, not to get too granular here or technical, is they balance out your risk over time. So basically a fund is, instead of choosing one stock or like 5 stocks, a fund spreads out your investments over many, many, many stocks, hundreds, maybe thousands of stocks. And that way, if one company skyrockets, your investment portfolio might go up a little, but by the same token, if a company tanks, your whole investment portfolio isn't going to just disappear. This is the principle of diversification, which means that you're spreading your bets out so that over the long run, you're not stressing about the short-term ups and downs of the market or a singular stock. You're looking at the general trend of the stock market over a 10, 20, 30, 40-year period. And what we find is that over every 10-year period in history, the stock market has gained, right? It's gained on average around 7, 8, 9%, depending on analysis you pay attention to. And this is, of course, not to say that past performance is any indicator of what the future will be. But if we can make a reasonable assumption of, let's say, if we're being conservative, even 6 or 7%, that if we spread our bets around investing to match the market, that our money will gain, let's say 6 or 7%. That's way more than you're going to get in a savings account. Savings account's like 1% interest rate if you have a good savings account. A lot of savings account are like 0.1% interest rate. So this idea of investing in the market is super, super important. And having a fund that matches the market as a whole, like an S&P 500 index fund, for example, is a great way to get started. Now, another thing that you mentioned is like, you think you have to have however much money to buy a stock. And the great thing now is there are so many tools and resources available to us to begin investing for very little. So, beyond your employer plan, there are things like robo-advisors now. There's a service, for example, called Betterment, and I think you can start with like $100 a month. If you can make that commitment, they waive like the initial $1,000 minimum, and if you do like a direct deposit, they'll let you start investing. And there are even things that let you invest with your spare change, like Acorns, though it's not my favorite service, but it's just a great way to know how accessible investing is, and that it doesn't have to be this big, scary thing that's only for rich people. It's for everybody, and it's a vehicle that really can grow our money in a way that keeping a money in a savings account alone cannot match.
So I want to start to begin to close this podcast by talking to you about the side hustle. Many educators I know, all right, they're tutoring, they're consulting, they're writing books, they're adjunct teaching, they're putting content on teacher pay teachers.
Yeah.
I love the side hustle because I know earlier you spoke about how, you could go speak somewhere and make all of this money at one time. And I remember I did this consulting gig at a school district and I got $2,300.
Nice.
For one day of my time. Right. And I'm like, but damn, that's not far off, Now, if I look at what I make monthly, now I make, more than that, but I'm like, well, that's one day.
Yeah, it's a pretty good deal.
That's awesome work. So how important, I guess, first of all, is it for people to have multiple streams of income? And then how should they go about sort of discovering what their side hustle could be? And the last part of it is, how do you make this money without it coming to bite you in the butt come taxes?
Absolutely. So I think to your first point, this idea of having multiple streams of income has never been more important. Just like we spoke about the idea of diversification when you're investing, I think that same principle now needs to apply. We earn income. And when you do only have one stream of income, all of your eggs are in one basket. So if anything happens, if the school closes, if there's restructuring, if there's layoffs, you're completely at risk. You have nothing, to fall back on. And this isn't to say you need to have another career that is earning you all of the same level of income. But it's good to have some sources here and there that you can then turn to and build up and know that you can scale if something should happen to your primary income stream. So I think this is really important. And I say especially now, because we are living in a world in which nobody stays at or not nobody, but very few people have the same job from their 20s to retirement. And I think that used to be the case. I think it's rarely the case anymore. And so it's one of the best forms of financial security you can create for yourself is to diversify your income streams. Now, in terms of how to do that, how to begin, what I recommend is really taking an inventory of your skills, your knowledge, and your experience. Because what I find is that we have a tendency to take for granted the things that we're really good at because they come easily to us. But what comes easily to us doesn't necessarily come easily to others. So if what comes easily to us is valuable and can provide value to someone else to whom it does not come easily to, well, then that is something that you can potentially make money off of. So what I tell people, don't overlook anything. Like when I say skills, knowledge, and experience, I mean everything. So even for me, in my experience column, I would write things like living in New York for 10 years. Like it's not like I was a clerk at a law office. It's not like that kind of experience, but it is something valuable. You know, I could provide recommendations and advice to someone visiting New York City. I could, create guides and resources. I could give tours. Like there's just so many ways to monetize the things that we have personally been through. But we have to start by recognizing what those things are. And one of the really good ways to assess this is to pay attention to what people come to you for. So like in any friend group, like there's like the one person who's like the person you go to for advice on something, let's say on construction or web development or fashion, right? So who are you? Who are you in the friend group? Like what do people come to you for? So in my friend group, I'm the person people go to find out about deals and how to negotiate their salaries. So obviously working in personal finance is a really good fit for me, but figure out what people are coming to you for. Make an inventory of your skills, knowledge, and experience, and then consider how you might start, shaping that into a product or a service. So whether, like you mentioned, there's tutoring, you mentioned consulting, there are all kinds of ways to do this, writing books, creating products. But we have to start from what the basis is of what value do we offer others. Now, in terms of taxes, so the way I like to approach this, because all of my income is on 1099s, so I don't have any W-2 jobs, nobody take out my taxes for me. What I tell people is remember that when you are filing, you are every department in the business. You are HR, you are accounting, you are obviously the service provider, your marketing, all the steps. And I think it's easy for us to get, especially if we do have a W-2 job, to think, oh, this will be taken care of for me. But no, there is nobody else. It's just you. So, it's really important to remember that and then to take on that responsibility, just like you do a follow-up email with any client. So, as soon as you finish a project, as soon as you get the paycheck, make sure it's going into an accounting software or into a spreadsheet. You're tracking the income and then setting aside the taxes that would usually be taken out of your paycheck at your W-2 job. You're going to do that for yourself in a separate savings account. So the tax time does come, you're paying that bill. Now, I'm a big fan, even though I work in personal finance, I still use an accountant because taxes is its own game. Bookkeeping is its own game. And for me, it's worth my peace of mind, my effort and energy to outsource some of that work. So I definitely recommend it as soon as possible. Yes, definitely set aside your taxes for yourself along the way. But if you have someone else there keeping you accountable, I think it's definitely worth the price. So that when the tax bill does come, you're not like, oh my goodness, I owe $6,000. That will be a lot harder to deal with than having somebody keep you accountable every step of the way.
Oh yeah. And to my listeners out there, you make sure you get that 1099.
Oh yeah.
And so, for me, this year, this tax year, I started actually writing articles for EdTech magazines and getting paid. As I'm going to for sure make sure I get that 1099. And last year, my wife and I did this keynote and presentations, and I was kind of waiting, like, where's my 1099? And I called them up and I said, I need it. They said, well, you got paid? I said, I know I got paid, but I don't work for you. So I get 1099 for my taxes. And and how I realized how important it was, my wife and I, we don't have any children. So we don't get those write-offs. So we don't get the earned income credit, right? But the accountant said, you see this 1099? That's your child. Right? Because, we get to write off the home office. We get to write off the internet. We get to write off the cell phones. And if I buy a new microphone, hey, I get to write that off as well. So all of these business expenses are very helpful and help mitigate the tax bill, even though a brother still pays the taxes. Like when I get the bill, I'm like, true story. I looked at my wife one time. The accountant was like, "Oh, you're going to owe $3,600." And I looked at my wife. I was like, "Well, why am I married?" Because I'm like, "Whoo, this is rough right here." So yeah, just to tell people, make sure you get that 1099 because it's going to come with a lot of benefits in terms of deductions. So before we go, what would you say is the most important lesson you have learned about money?
I mean, there's so many. But for me personally, what has been the most transformative is the value of making more. And it sounds really silly, and it might sound maybe even greedy, like this idea of what we talked about of money being taboo. To say I want to make more money can feel really shameful. But kind of flipping that script, like I said, and reality checking that assumption and realizing that making more isn't just about money. It's about opportunity. It's about being able to give. It's about being able to live with purpose. That was really transformative. And then also just the exponential power of making more compared to cutting back. I mean, yes, I am always looking for ways to save money, but cutting back is inherently limited. There is only so much you can cut back. Eventually, you're going to get to zero. Your capacity to earn more is unlimited. So if you can continue to find ways of finding extra income streams, of scaling those income streams, like you said, you might not be able to negotiate in your primary job, but you can probably negotiate in your side hustles. It's just exponential, the level of opportunity that is available to produce income, and then to grow that income and build that wealth big picture, to really live in alignment with your purpose and the things you really want to do, is just so freeing. And that's been the most transformative thing in my financial life.
Awesome. Thank you again, Stefanie, for being a guest on the show. This has been awesome information, even better than our original podcast. And I can't thank you enough for coming back on the show. And this is awesome because, yesterday was our last day of working until January. So,
nice.
Yeah.
Nice long holiday.
Yes, it's going to be awesome. And my wife told me, she said, you make this be your last podcast while we're off. This is going to be wonderful. It will be released today for people to listen to it. And people, I'm going to have ways I'm going to put this, because you know how I do this. It's going up on SoundCloud, iTunes. The video cast is going up on YouTube. I'm going to tweet this out. It's going on LinkedIn as well. And I will have it where you will have contact information in terms of being able to connect with Stefanie on Twitter. So as always, again, thank you, Stefanie, for being a guest on the show.
Thank you so much for having me back.
You are welcome. People, invest in you, 80 you. Peace.